The unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, we can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. Today I thought I'd talk about courage. So what is courage? The word, it comes from, as a thought, the Latin word for heart. Sound a bit, can we turn me down a bit? There we go, thank you, that's better. The Latin word for heart. And looking it up in the Oxford English Dictionary, my great friend, it used to mean one's kind of nature. Actually, courage is one's nature. And then it meant one's sort of purpose or aspiration. And then it meant kind of energy, life energy. Well, now it means, well, to us it means the quality of character which shows itself in facing danger undaunted, or in acting despite fear or lack of confidence. And that's how we usually understand it nowadays. I quite like quite a nice, clear explanation. However, I asked some of our monks what courage means, and nearly all of them said the willingness to go on. Interesting, isn't that? Different. One said also, living wholeheartedly is courage. And another monk said, leaping beyond all fear. So it gives us food for thought. Well, as we know, there's a lot of fear and anxiety in our world at present. I keep reading articles about how to deal with anxiety, usually in kind of, psychological terms, or how rude people are nowadays. They're all rude and yelling at each other and being beastly, and there's violence, more violence than ever, and drunkenness and drugs and awfulness and, people killing each other. It all sounds very depressing. People are worried about COVID, and they're tired of it, sick of wearing masks and staying home and all those things. Climate change, people are really worried, and people have horrible results, as we know. People are losing their lives, their homes, their families, their livelihoods, really awful because of fire and flood and hurricanes and all that. It's all very depressing. So what is courage in the face of all this? Sometimes it is doing some, the willingness to leap beyond all fear. Sometimes we may be called to face danger undaunted. Running into a burning building to rescue somebody, it could happen. Rescue your cat or your child or whatever. I also think of the cats first. Saving a drowning person, But we're not often called on to do these things, actually, although sometimes it happens. And when it does happen, people do amazing things to help other beings, as we know. One thing about courage that just occurred to me is that we don't even think about acting courageously. We just do something. Oh, I'm going to be courageous here. It doesn't usually happen that way. We just do the thing, whether it's an immediate thing or just doing what's right, Am I going to be courageous here? Because acting with courage also means often doing the right thing, just doing the right thing. Even when we know there's probably going to be difficult consequences, to do what needs to be done. The courage of one's convictions, to stand up and be counted. Sometimes in some big public way, sometimes just in a very small way that nobody even may see, just to do the right thing, do what's good. Keeping to the precepts, often takes courage, actually, and sometimes quite a lot of courage, to do something that may be inconvenient to ourselves or unpopular with other people. It's easier sometimes, or seems to be easier, just to go along with things. Oh, it'll be all right, Oh, it wouldn't make much difference anyway. But even those little things actually do make a difference. Those little acts of courage, of keeping to the precepts when it's not convenient or we don't know if it'll turn out okay. It may be seemingly difficult for us. It may make us unpopular in some way if we're doing something that's contrary to what a lot of other people think. And yet sometimes it's what we just do. And we don't tend to think, I'm going to be courageous. We tend to just think, I've got to do this. I can't live with myself if I don't. But mostly, courage is just the willingness to go on, as our monks say, the willingness just to live our life as wholeheartedly as we can. Even when we don't feel like it, we don't feel like doing the next thing, we'd rather stay in bed, we'd rather just avoid it. No, I've got to do this, And this is the practice of faith, actually, just the willingness to live our life, to go on doing the next thing. Faith in that which sustains us. In the most difficult of circumstances, as well as in easier times, something sustains us, and the willingness to go on and live our life in the midst of that is courage. Doesn't look like it, but it is. When we've suffered some great loss, so many people have died of COVID, and they die of all kinds of other things. But to go on with our life in the midst of that, even if we just feel like giving up, in the midst of grief and sadness, to continue can take a lot of courage. To let that grief arise, not to sort of push it away, let it come up, let it stay as long as it needs to, let it go when it's time for it to leave. And to continue to live our life, to invest in our life, to cultivate gratitude for what we have left and for the help we receive. That's courage, just to continue to live our life when things are really hard. Living with sickness and pain can require tremendous courage. Day by day, hour by hour, moment by moment, just living with pain, sickness, something that may not go away. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, And in fact, we can only live with that moment by moment. You can't think about your whole life ahead of you, filled with pain, sickness, sorrow, grief, and so forth. You have to just take it as it comes, because you never know. Otherwise, you just, lie down and die. But living with courage is actually acceptance, taking things as they come, and doing our best with it. To practice true acceptance actually takes considerable courage, just to look at things head on, face it wholeheartedly, say, okay, this is what I need to deal with, this is what I need to face. To truly accept it, this is what I have, I can't push it away, I've got to just deal with it, live with it. And then often they're not as, well, usually not nearly as grim as we thought, because when we accept something wholeheartedly, it helps, as we all know, it helps immensely. It's the fear, it's the resistance. I don't want to look at it, I don't want to deal with it, I want something else. That's the suffering. But if we can truly accept what comes our way, that takes courage, and it opens the door, and it really helps us. So all these dismal seeming things, they're actually not dismal, really, because they help us on our way. All those things that seem so hard, they help us. We learn from them, we learn compassion for ourselves and other beings. We learn to accept what we have that's joyful, to be grateful for what we do have, and not to take it for granted. Well, as we know, living with courage doesn't mean we don't have fear, as it says in our dictionary. Acting despite fear or lack of confidence. Just living our life and not letting fear stop us. Or lack of confidence, Sometimes we have to do something we don't feel confident about at all. We don't want to do it, but we've got to do it. We just have to do our best with it. This is the first time for everything we do. Starting a new job, speaking in public, doing a Dharma talk, teaching in school. If we're a doctor, diagnosing an illness we may not be sure about and giving the treatment and trusting it'll work out, that takes a lot of courage to do something like that, rather than just say, well, I'll just do the safe thing. No, I think it's this. So many things, raising children, all through our life. We're called on to do things that we haven't done before, or we don't feel confident about. We're not sure we can do them. We just have to do them anyway. Or just if we're not a very confident person, just living our life, If we want, I think we all feel not as confident as we'd like to, or as we might look. Just to be willing to live our life, do what's needed, rise to the occasion, to keep on going, just getting out of bed and doing the day, takes courage. And when you think about it, just to live our life as a human being takes enormous courage. Our life is very fragile. We're very vulnerable beings living on this little planet spinning around, and, all kinds of things happen. We're so vulnerable in so many ways, and yet we have to just live our life. Animals, they do this, Little creatures like mice and birds, very, very vulnerable. They get out, they live their life, they come out of their little hole, they get their food, they raise their kids, they do all this stuff. They're not just sitting and, starving to death. They come out and live their life. They have to, or they couldn't survive. And they always know they're in danger of being killed by something bigger. You see a deer with his huge eyes and ears. They'll take a bite of food and then look up. What's going on? Another bite of food and look up. Imagine living that way. And yet they do it with great courage. They raise their babies and they live their life. Mice I admire enormously. They're really smart. They're really courageous little beings. Terribly vulnerable. Nature's perfect snack food, And yet there they are, living their life. Cheeky little things, really cute. One time, finding we trap mice out of the hermitage. We'd try to trap mice that came into the house, otherwise you have horrible trouble. You'd catch a mouse and then take it out to put it out in the woods. You're not going to kill them, obviously. So we find a nice spot for a mouse. And one time I had this trap, and I just opened the trap, and the little mouse leapt out. Usually they'll stay and wait until you put them on the ground, and they'll think about it. This little guy just flung himself out, not knowing where he was going to end up. Anything but this cage. Out there. Fortunately, into something nice, But I just thought the courage of that little beast, just flinging himself out into the void and trusting that it would be okay. I just never forgot that little guy. There's just something about that, flinging himself out. In movies you see these, the movies we love are when somebody has had this sort of boring, dismal life, and there's some opening that they can go live a much better life, and they fling themselves out at the last minute, right before the credits. They finally do the deed, they catch the plane, they leap on the boat, they do the thing, and of course they're going to be happy forever after. But there's something about that, this sort of leap of faith, of just flinging oneself out to do something that one doesn't really know, rather than stay in the little safe place. But mostly life is not like that. Mostly we just live our life, day by day, with courage. There's a quote I love. Cast your body and mind into the great treasury of the divine light and never look back. Somebody reminded me of it yesterday. I love it. Well, what does that mean? Cast your body and mind into the great treasury of the divine light and never look back. It's not a one-off thing. We don't just cast ourselves into the void and that's the end of it, To do it, to cast ourselves into that great treasury of the divine light, I think it means to constantly entrust ourselves to the three treasures, over and over and over again. It's not a one-off great deed. It's more like every day, as we drink our morning tea, as we get out of bed, as we go to sleep at night, as we deal with our difficulties, as we're on the phone, over and over, just come back to faith and the great matter, that which sustains us throughout everything. To let go, casting ourselves out, is to let go of what we've held on to let go of our attachment to all our worries and fears and our familiar, whatever they are, our anxieties, our attempt to control our life, letting go of that attempt to control our life. And it's a moment-by-moment thing. We do it over and over again, constantly letting go of that attempt to corral ourselves, live in the safe place, control our life. Living wholeheartedly in this very moment, as one of our monks said, and to trust that that which sustains us will do so, will always do so, in life, in health, in sickness, in death. We haven't talked about courage in the face of death. That's probably the greatest courage of all, to just face that. And yet, People die all the time. Millions of beings die every day. Every moment beings are dying. And to face it with courage as deeply as we can. And when the time comes, to let go, you know. So to live our life with courage is to be willing to go on. To sit still in the midst of all the conditions of our lives, whatever comes our way, as best we can. And most of all, to be willing to let go of the seeming little safe things, or the seeming refuge, which is not the real refuge, but to let go of our opinions, our desires, our clinging, our control, all the things of our lives that we hold on to, our attachment to ourself, of all things, that attachment to me and mine, and me as the center of the universe. If it to relinquish that, which isn't just a one-time thing, we can't just cast ourselves away from that, is over and over again to see where we cling on to something, to see where our selfishness actually, and to just keep letting go of that, letting go of our fears and worries, letting go of our clinging to our selfishness, of what's in it for me, to do what's right, what's best, what's good to do here. Keeping to the precepts, doing the right thing, doing the best thing, or just drinking our morning tea, you know. Most of it is just very mundane, just being willing to face the things of our lives, whether they're big things, small things, moment by moment, looking at our own mind, just seeing where we, you know, nourish resentment or judgment or whatever, and being willing to let that go. That takes courage, actually, to be willing to look at our own mind, to look at what's going on in our own little heart. Oh my goodness, look at that, you know. Well, face it, accept it, let it go. This takes huge courage. Living our life takes huge courage, but it beats the heck out of not doing it, you know. Because what else can we do? We have to live with courage. All beings, we have to live with courage. It's our very lifeblood, actually. Just living courageously, living our life as human beings. Nothing special, but it's just what we do. And in this time when people are worried, you know, I think to come back to that actually we are living with courage and we can do so. And not to worry terribly about everything. As Reverend Master Jiyu used to say, sometimes the sanity level in the world goes down and then eventually comes back up. Well, I think we're still waiting for it to come back up. It seems to be going down, but it will eventually, things will change. And in the meantime, we can just do our best. So when we're yelled at in the grocery store because we're wearing a mask or not wearing a mask or whatever it might be, I don't know if people actually do that, but I've heard that they do. Or when we see things on the news which we hadn't had to see, or, you know, all the things, not being able to do what we'd like to do, not seeing relatives we'd like to see. It's getting better, but still there's a lot of loss in our lives. People who've died, you know, just to keep on with as bright a heart as we can muster with all of that, because there's something deeper that sustains us, and we can learn from all of it, and it can all help us on our way. And that's our talk for the day.